Come back to us, Don. Do it. Come on. 2, 3, 4.
And the answer was 75% of the time, people
Come on. Okay, get the oxygen. Easy breath.
were revived.
Come on, guys. Easy breath.
It worked 75% of the time.
Easy breath. Easy breath, Don.
The actual number is more like 8.
8%? Roughly 8% survive to at least a month.
Wow.
And in fact, it's worse than that.
Here's how that 8% breaks down.
When you actually break it down, there was a fellow who did a study in 2010. He looked at 95,000 cases. Actually more than that. And I think it was all the cases in Japan that year. And what he found was that about 3% had what you would call a good outcome. That is, return to a meaningful quality of life.
You and me sitting here talking and eating sandwiches.
Exactly. About the same number,
3% or so,
ended up in a chronic vegetative state. Not quite brain dead, but pretty close.
And the final 2%
were in some sort of intermediate level. Not good, but they weren't comatose. Everybody else was dead. That's the reality of it. And we physicians, we know that. We've actually done CPR. We have actually laid hands on the chest.
Here's something I didn't know. Ken says that when you do CPR, you often end up cracking the person's ribs.
Wow.
And yet that, according to Ken, is kind of mild in terms of some of the things that doctors put patients through.
I think a lot of times we're doing things to people that we wouldn't do to a terrorist.
Is that true or is that overstated?
I'm not kidding.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, paralyzing somebody so that you cannot move, which you generally have to do when you put a person on a ventilator, a breathing machine, a respirator. When you put somebody on one of these machines, it breathes for you. But the problem is you'll fight it because you'll have your own rhythm. So what happens is you have a person that is fighting, and you can't get air in and out of them. So you paralyze them.
So they stop fighting. You know, they can't move.
But it doesn't mean they're asleep. They're not asleep. They are completely helpless. And yet they're aware of everything that's going on around them.
Sounds nightmarish, actually.
Yeah.
Ken took me through a bunch of different situations, from congestive heart failure to lung disease and pancreatic cancer, where he feels basically that the treatment is worse than the actual disease of what you have. It may be prolonging, but not for very long, and the life that you have left is misery.
Right.
In fact, Ken says that colleagues of his, other doctors,
They'll turn to me in the ICU and they say, if you find me like this, kill me. And they're not kidding.
he says there are doctors who wear medallions with the words "no code" stamped on them, which just means "don't resuscitate me." He's even seen tattoos that say "no code."
Okay. Can I talk to you now?
Yes.
Do you have any idea? Come on, turn that off. All right, Sean, can I just break in for 1 second?
Yeah.
Because while you were reporting this piece, a very strange coincidence happened to me. I was visiting my dad, and after dinner one night, he sits me down and he says, I have something important I want to tell you. I've signed an advanced directive, which basically means if I end up in the hospital, terminally ill or something, I don't want a lot of medical stuff done to me. I had not told him about your story at all.
Really?
Yeah. So it was just out of the blue.
And he shows you a piece of paper, or?
No, not that. But I just saw him a couple days ago and asked him to read it to me because I hadn't actually seen it yet. What does it say?
It says, I direct that medical care be withheld or withdrawn, and that I be permitted to die naturally with only the administration of medications.
I can skip over that paragraph.
I authorize the withholding of artificially provided food, intravenous fluids, and other nourishments.
If I cannot give directions regarding my medical care, I intend that my family and physicians honor this declaration as the final expression of my legal right to refuse medical care, and I accept the consequences of that refusal.
Yeah.
Huh. So pain medication is all you really want.
Yeah. To keep me comfortable.
So, looks like the baby's crying. So it sounds like, why would you want artificially provided food, intravenous fluids, or other nourishment?
That's my choice.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like it's that much of an intervention, really.
It is an intervention to sustain life unnecessarily. If I should ever have a terminal condition.
Would you want CPR done?
If I have a choice, the answer is no.
But wouldn't you want Mom or I to be in a position where we can make the decision?
I mean, what if you conflict?
Like, she feels one way, I feel another?
Yeah.
You told me this is one of the worries that doctors have, that, they'll have talked to the patient or the patient's family, explain the situation carefully, and everyone's agreed, no more interventions. But then a random family member will just show up, like a cousin or an estranged son or daughter, maybe carrying a lot of guilt. And they're like, no, doc, you have to do whatever it takes.
At the end of the day, I give the option to the patient and to the family to make a decision. That's what I have to do.
Except in this case, when the patient is him. But by having this, it means we have to honor this, right? We can't have our own feelings about it.
You can have your own feelings, but you still have to honor this.
But it just the thing that gives me pause is that, I mean, you're a doctor. Your job is to prolong life and to sustain life, and you choose not to when it comes to your own life.
Nobody said my job is to sustain life. My job is to sustain life when it is possible. It is not to sustain life when it's futile. And if you're going to sustain my life on a respirator, I don't want it. That kind of life, I do not want.
More than anything, the thing he wanted to make sure of is that he does not die in a hospital. He definitely does not want to die at the place where he works.
That's something that came up a few times among the doctors at the conference that I went to.
I think I don't want to die in a hospital bed.
This is Tim Ryan, a resident at Cleveland Clinic. Why not?
Because I see patients and patients' families suffer tremendously, and I think we do a poor job of communicating futility to them. I don't know how to communicate that effectively.
There is one thing that struck me that talking to my dad. There's a question that patients will sometimes ask that can be a kind of bridge between doctors and patients. Very often, he says, when people are in the middle of this decision, they'll turn to him and they'll say, Doc, what would you do if this was your mother or father? And he says, when they ask the question that way, it creates an entirely different conversation. He can say, here's what I would honestly do. Or in fact, and I did not know this, here's what I actually did.
It happened with my parents. When my father fell and developed complications as a result of the fall.
When I asked
He
him
says he
about
called the
camera
doctor,
and I asked you to
no more
videotape,
medical
Yeah.
interventions.
I
And
keep
he
saying
ended up
it's
dying
associated with
comfortably.
tasks. When you
Same
did it,
thing
this is
happened
what
with
you
my
started
mother.
doing.
I had
Okay.
discussed it with my mother and my father
It seems to
when
be
they were not
associated
sick.
with-
This was a plan. I can tell you in 9% of the patients that I see, such planning doesn't happen.
I had a habit for most of my career when I'd have a new patient come in, particularly over the age of 50, I'd ask them, how do you want to die?
This is Ken Murray again.
A lot of them, you give me kind of a funny look. That's an odd question for a doctor to be asking me. And I said, well, it's the one thing we can be sure of that's going to happen eventually, and I want to make sure it happens the way you want. And so people, the typical answer is, well, I'd like to die in my sleep, painlessly. I mean, what actually is that? That's usually a heart attack or stroke, something of that nature, that happens just like that. And you're gone.
And that's what we and our doctors are essentially doing everything in our power to avoid. So, like, when you ask people in the abstract, they're saying,
How do I want to die? Peacefully.
I want to die peacefully, I want to die in my sleep, and everything like that. But when you ask them the specifics, you hear,
No.
pound on my chest, stick a tube down my throat. So it's this paradox.
Well, it sounds to you like a paradox, but think about it. It could be. It's so healthy to do both even at the same time. It's healthy to want to stay, and it's healthy to know how to be ready to go. I was listening to a Fresh Air sort of retake, and they had Maurice Sendak on the air, who died not too long ago. Before he died, he was on Fresh Air.
It's an amazing interview.
Yeah, and
Really
Terry
is.
Gross was talking to him, and he's sitting there in his Connecticut house looking out the window at a tree, and he says to Terry, I am so in love with the tree and the beauty of it and my chance to keep it company just a little while longer. And I want to stay. And every extra day I get is a day that's precious to me and makes me want to stay even harder. But he says to Terry, I am ready to go when it's time. I've made myself ready. And that compromise you make with yourself, to love it with your whole soul, and yet at the same time say, I'll know when it's over, and I'm composed enough and prepared enough to take my exit. That's what a good death is.
Thank you, Sean Cole.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for listening.
Start of message.
Radiolab is produced by my son, Jad Abumrad.
Hey guys, it's Sean Cole. Here we are with the credits.
Our staff includes Ellen Horn,
Soren Wheeler, Tim Howard,
Brenna Farrell, Molly Webster,
Melissa O'Donnell, Dylan Keefe, Jamie York,
Kelsey Paget, Lynn Levy,
and Andy Mills. Oh, that's nice. Okay, bye-bye. End of message.
This is 90.9 WBUR and WBUR.org.
We're funded by you, our listeners, and by Google Express, where users can shop stores like Costco, Stop & Shop, and Walgreens, all on one website with same-day delivery. More at google.com/express. Gregorian Rugs, furniture by Dovetail and Adrian's Furniture Makers, annual midwinter event at the Mill at Newton Lower Falls, and GregorianRugs.com. And F.H. Perry